Hi, Debra. Welcome to the show.
Hi, April and Kim. Thank you very much for inviting me.
We're
We're
thrilled.
thrilled. We're absolutely thrilled to have you on the podcast today. We've been looking forward to it for a long time. You have certainly seen menopause conversations change over the years. You started Henpicked Menopause in the Workplace 8 years ago. Are you at 8 years right now?
We're at 11 years this
Oh
year
my.
for Henpicked the Community, which I don't know where that time has gone. Don't they say your time flies when you're having fun?
Yeah.
And Henpicked was originally a community that was set up for women. And we always say women who weren't born yesterday. And the concept was there's Mum's Net, there's Net Mums, there's teenagers with all of their sorts of things. And we didn't think there was anything for those of us in midlife. So it was set up as a community covering happiness, health, and wealth, the everyday sort of cheers that you would give to someone. And yeah, so it's 11 years old this year. And yeah, I'm still loving Henpicked, but to your point, April, around henpicked menopause in the workplace, yes, that's 8 years this year since we started getting everybody talking about menopause and in the workplace. And that's certainly been a huge learning.
Yes,
Mm.
and we were ready to hear some of those learning lessons. But I'd love to start off with you just sharing with our audience why you launched Handpicked. Why did you do that? I mean, 11 years ago, if you really think about this in timing, no one was talking about menopause at the time, right? I mean, it was still a taboo subject, and it's somewhat is still today, but you started Handpicked. Why?
Why? Well, the reason I got into menopause, which, if you'd have said to me 11 years ago, you're going to be talking about menopause every day and you're going to be encouraging everybody else to talk about it, and your mission will be for the world to be a menopause-friendly place, I probably wouldn't have believed you. Because it was certainly not on my radar, but we did notice as part of the Henpicked community that when we talked about menopause, that's when we saw that we'd got the engagement. That's when we got lots of questions from people and comments that, I'm really struggling with this. And you know how it is. Sometimes when something piques your interest, you sort of say, well, why is that? That's very odd. Why don't we talk about it? And it really did pique my curiosity to a point of, and I have my husband would say it was my first waking thought and the last thing I mentioned before I went to sleep. I couldn't help it, but it was that sort of mystery around why don't we talk about this then? Why are we getting so many emails from people saying they're really struggling with the menopause, but they're not getting the support? And it's certainly not something my mum ever talked to me about. I mean, at that particular time, I hadn't actually reached menopause. But I was certainly struggling with the effects of perimenopause, but I'd never heard the word perimenopause.
Right.
So, and I thought it was just me. So you get all of these emails coming into you, and you think, oh, actually, probably it isn't just me. And why is this such a taboo, a stigma? And I can remember one of the sort of moments in life. I started then running menopause sessions in a local hotel,
Oh.
and they were always packed.
Hmm.
But this particular occasion, we were missing a few attendees that said they were coming along. So I popped into the bar and I thought perhaps they'd been waylaid to get a glass of wine. Way in. So we did that. And I walked up to a couple of women and I said, are you here for the menopause session? Well, they looked horrified.
Hmm.
I'd really taken the top off their Thursday night. And I understand why, because people assumed back then, it's changing now, menopause was a lot older. You know,
Yes.
the sort of things that the first time the BBC asked to interview me, and they sent a secret reporter out onto the streets near the venue, and they said, what's the first word that comes to mind when we say the word menopause? And passers-by were saying, hot flushes, old, painful, past it, crazy was shouted in the background. And all of those words that you think, That's why people don't put their hand up, and that's why people look horrified when you approach them in the bar and ask them if they're coming to the menopause session. It's
Yeah.
because the negative mindset around it. So after I'd run a few of those sessions in hotels, and I'd written the book Menopause: The Change for the Better, and we got the website, but it wasn't enough change for me. I'm not known for my patience, and I wanted to see this picture changing more quickly. Having gone through that journey, my experience, my background is in corporates, large organizations, and as a senior manager. I had the notion of actually, if you told employers what was going on, if you helped them understand their responsibilities in this, then surely they'll do something about it. This might be our opportunity to amplify
Mhm.
our activity in a big way, because you train the employer, you get champions in workplace, everybody talks about it. And yeah, so that's where, I turned up at one of my fellow communication directors' houses with a flip chart under my arm and some pens and said, I'm going to run an event. And as it turns out, it appears to be the first menopause in the workplace conference in the world. And that's how we found the first employers to take action.
It's
Really love
amazing.
that.
Yeah. The UK is so much farther ahead than the US in this space. What have you learned in the 8 years that you've been doing this that employers have, latched on to why this is important and what women's point of view has been in that time frame?
And it is different around the world, isn't it? Because, some of the learnings, and I know I often say every day is a school day, and
Yeah.
it certainly is with menopause, because it feels like, when you sort of peel an onion, the
Mhm.
next layer and the next layer. And if I go back to when we were doing the first training sessions, our knowledge has increased. I think we're all learning so much more about this, but there's also a lot more to learn. So I think my big learnings from the workplace would be that employers did start to take an interest in this. It took a little while for us to find those inspirational employers who'd say, well, we'll go first.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're happy to do this. They trusted us to say, well, we'll put a program together and we'll invite you in and you can talk to our colleagues, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So it took a little while for us to find those that were prepared to put the head above the parapet and say, we're doing this. But I have a lot of confidence in employers. And actually, I think if I cast my mind back to only last Thursday, we had a round table with many of the financial industry that we work with. And the difference was stark from those early days to where these employers had got to. And I did refer to it as, once upon a time, when we were looking at this in 2016, 2017, it really was the basics. Whereas these are now the masters of menopause in the workplace. They're exploring all sorts of different angles. For example, differences in ethnicity, considering menopause and neurodiversity, thinking in so many different ways about how they can broaden the conversation because they've been on this journey. So for me, that every day is a school day, because it's not just a one size fits all. Every individual is different, every employee is different. This is an emerging picture, and there's so much research that is still required, and we'll keep doing it. So, I think it is that whole keep your radar up, network, listen, learn, repeat.
Yeah, yeah, and gather that feedback from the partners that you're working with, right? Listen, lean in, and pivot, enhance the programs, pivot, change them as organizations changes, their needs change as well, right? We lean in and we listen. I love that.
Yes, yes, and that is important, because I think that's probably one of the key things. Whenever we're working with employers, we don't make assumptions
Mm.
around what they do. We do like to check in, or we do always check in with them to say, this is what we're thinking of doing. Tell me what you've already done. Tell me
Mhm.
what the response to that was. This could be the next step, and really working in partnership with them so we know when we're delivering training sessions that it's landing exactly right. And then the immediate thing that we do is say, how did that work?
Mhm.
What did your colleagues say? What would you do differently? How do we keep this conversation flowing?
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Right.
that's the other big one that we've all got to understand, I think. And this has been a big learning for us. And maybe again, this comes back to my I always want things to go a whole lot faster than sometimes they do, is that cultural change takes time.
Mhm.
And we see some employers in the UK and they'll say, oh, well, we've done the policy and we've put this on the intranet and we've done all of this. And we'll say, and what else?
Mhm.
Because with such a sensitive conversation, with something that has been so taboo, and I know we can talk about menopause, we can say it anywhere. Doesn't matter where you are, we can talk about it. But for some individuals, it's a personal matter. They
Yeah.
may feel it's something I really don't want to talk about, or in some cultures, it's a real taboo. You really don't talk about that at home. And for some individuals, they might feel worried. What will people think of me? Like those women in that bar. What will people think of me? Will they think I'm old and past it? Will they not give me that opportunity, that job I wanted? Will they think I'm coming towards the end of the career? Will they think I'm not the same as I've always been? So there's so many barriers to getting in the way that you have to consider that in the cultural change aspect. It is that breaking down those barriers, keeping the conversation going, huge amounts of listening and
Mhm.
understanding and asking questions like what would help.
Right.
Right.
Creating that safe culture, right? Keeping the conversation going, creating the safe culture so that individuals feel comfortable having the conversation to your point and asking for appropriate accommodations and right it's the and that really is key here, it's one simple word but and.
And
Mhm.
if you can keep checking in with your people, your colleagues as well, your employees, because last one of the employers was chatting to me, and I was saying, "How's it going?" And they've done a fair bit. And she was saying one of them, a colleague, had was saying, "I still don't feel comfortable talking about it, though. I see that we're doing all of these things, but I'm not there yet. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to come to the menopause support group just yet."
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's like, well, you have to meet people where they are. Give it time and, keep the conversation going until we get to a point where people say, of course, I know all about menopause. Symptoms, not really. I knew what to look for and I knew what to do. But that does take time. So, maybe cultural change, you've always got to have your focus on it. It's not a tick box exercise, but there are lots of things that you can do. And it really does pay off.
Yeah.
Have you seen the conversation change in the employer space in the 8 years that you've been doing this?
Yes.
Mm.
I'd say for the better,
Yeah.
broadly, because, if I think of the first menopause policies, um, we used to write the first one we wrote, and that was published in 2017. We did get back in touch with the employer and said, maybe we ought to review that now,
Yeah.
because things have moved on from
Right.
there, and it was all about women. It was,
Right.
it's really not. Nevertheless, I still sometimes see tweets that say half of the population will experience this. And we say, actually, everyone experiences menopause, half of them firsthand, the other half through their relationships with a family member, friend, or a colleague at
Right.
work.
Right.
We all need to know about it. It's a life skill. So I think we've actually moved on a long way for appreciating as a life skill. Doesn't matter what age you are, you need to know about menopause. And just as we teach about the birds and the bees and periods and fertility in school, then we need to be considering the other side,
Right.
menopause. Time your body changes as well. And actually, in the UK, some of our schools are now, they're changing the biology books, they're educating in schools, and that feels more whole.
Right.
That certainly was not on anybody's radar in 2016, 2017. So there's greater understanding of that. But with the everyday being a school day, I read a report that came out this morning around differences in experience by ethnicity, specifically on symptoms,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
different ethnicities and race may experience
Mhm.
symptoms in a different way, a different prevalence for hot flushes or difficulty sleeping. And this is new research that is coming out. So we're learning about things all the time. And I think that has changed the conversation. That has enabled it to open up and for people to appreciate that, it's not the same for everyone. There's still huge gaps on the research, and I think taking this forward, then I think we do need to look at menopause from all angles. For example, menopause and neurodiversity is a research program that we funded because appreciating the intersectionality, some
Right.
individuals won't be just experiencing menopause, they'll be experiencing other things at the same time. Well, what difference does that make?
Right.
Yeah, a
Right.
lot of difference. Um, what advice would you give to our listeners who really feel like their employers should do something more around menopause? There's a lot, it feels like a personal thing that you don't want to talk about, but you're taking it to work, right? And so what would you say to people that are like, wow, I really wish that my employer would, understand better, support me more, give me more education? You have thoughts on that?
Well, I would say a lot of the masters of menopause in the workplace in the UK, people that have achieved awards on this, it's usually an individual that starts it.
Mm.
Mm.
Mhm.
And last week's round table was amazing for us because a lot of those individuals are the ones that actually started it in their organisation. Now, I'd say I would think they're probably all up for an award for courage.
True.
Yeah,
Being courageous. Yes.
Yeah, because do you really want to be the first person to talk about menopause? But somebody has to.
right.
And whether it's how able you feel to talk about it, or whether you can talk to somebody in your HR team to say, hey, I'm seeing what's happening here, I'm looking at the demographics of our organization, that might be a lever in.
Mhm.
And are we thinking about doing something in our organization? I'd very much like to get involved. Or is this something that we can learn? If an organization is international, are they doing something in the UK that you could adapt and bring across to your organizations in the US? So I'd say, or check out if they're doing anything. You could do it as a really nice appreciative inquiry, couldn't you? Hey,
Right.
I'm reading all about this, and the Women in Work Summit is coming, and I've been seeing this that's been going on. I'd like to get involved with whatever we're doing in our organization. Is it you? Are you doing something? So,
Yeah.
however you might word it, but many of the organizations we support, those individuals have been absolutely fundamental to the change. And they do say change starts one person at a time, don't they?
Yeah.
Uh,
There's
but
the
one of the things that the learning from those people, they've all said pretty much the same thing, that they were surprised when they started talking about menopause, who joined in.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it just takes one brave soul, right? And the rest will follow. And I think one of the ahas that we continue to see here at MiDOViA as we talk to more individuals and workplaces is that moment where individuals realize I'm not alone and other people are experiencing this and other people want this knowledge. So, oftentimes, to your point, Deborah, it does take that one person and that one voice to maybe speak up through their ERG, their women's group, go to HR, have a gentle conversation to say, right, what are we doing? What can we do? What lessons can we learn from the UK, such as your organization, Deborah? What can we learn from other organizations here in the US that are doing that? So that is the beautiful piece about Women in Work that's coming up on June 5th, because we gather all of these organizations to share those ideas and forward thinking cultural practices, right? I think
Yeah.
it's fantastic. I'm interested, really, Deborah, because you've been doing this for so long and you've been working with individuals, you gathered feedback through your handpicked community, you have your workplace programs. Have there been any surprises along the way? Has there been moments where you're like, "Wow, that one really surprised me."
Um, oh, big surprises. Well, we got some awards last year, and that surprised us because we don't really go for awards. We're just focused on our mission and changing things. So that was a very, very pleasant surprise. And actually, there's been it would probably be when people join in and make this their own. So if I think of somebody like Chris Pitt from
Mhm,
HSBC UK, who is such a huge ally and for menopause. And when I was giving evidence in Parliament for this, he was on the same day, and I'd not heard him speak about it before. He'd been on the receiving end of the training sessions, and he'd introduced us sometimes. And the way he spoke about the importance of men understanding menopause and the difference that it makes absolutely blew me away. And I don't think I could have engaged other men in the same way that Chris does. And the fact that he still um, talks about it in with every opportunity. And I
mm,
think that the sentence that he used on that particular session was one that made us all go, "Oh," he says, "it made me realize I probably wasn't the husband I wanted to be." And we were like,
mm.
"Oh."
Oh,
We love
shoot.
Chris. I
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
Amazing. He was absolutely amazing. And if I think of the Menopause-friendly Employer Awards last year, that was the one that made me go, wow. Because if I think of 2016, when I was pretty much calling all of my contacts and saying, I'm putting on a conference on menopause. Would you like to come to it? I really think it's important that you come to this. And they were saying, excuse me, you what?
Mm,
Because for them it was completely left field, and to seeing 400 people in their best dress, walking the red carpet at the Royal Lancaster. And it's such a special award ceremony because these are people in the menopause friendly membership who support each other and they'll share each other. They're very generous. And instead of going, oh, well, we didn't win that one, they got it, they were actually actively cheering for each other. So it wasn't oh, well, we didn't win. It was oh, you really deserved that. And it was such a spirit in a way that I'd never expected to experience. So seeing so many people cheering for each other and congratulating each other and sharing and being generous because they're all so passionate about the subject. That was an amazing one. And the fact that we couldn't get anybody off the dance floor at midnight is something else. They can dance. But
there's
they were seeing them, people walking round tables and saying, oh, can we connect sometime? Because I've seen what you've done on such and such. And they'll have those meetings and
right.
they'll know they'll support each other. So I suppose that's the start to finish. And of course, we've got those employer awards, menopause friendly employer awards again this September.
Mhm,
And for me, that's a moment in time. There, people celebrating
mhm.
the difference that this has made to their lives and to others.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you realize what an impact that you've made in this space when you think back to your little hotel
The biggest
sessions
part,
to,
right?
to parties celebrating in menopause and what and how far the UK has come during that time. So, bravo
Mhm.
on all the work. And the three of us and Emily, we talk all the time about like just keep going, just keep asking the questions, just keep offering it as an opportunity, and people will want to come along. So you've given a great example on that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very kind of you. I'm very much in it. We're all in this together and we all have a role to play.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm always saying passion and persistence, it'll keep coming. And one of the things that I'm very mindful of, and I shared this at the Menopause Friendly Employer Awards, and it surprised people in that, I'm very much what we're doing today is helping people today, but it's the generations to come that
Right.
will benefit. We can't forget. And when you consider the oldest millennials are coming to menopause now, if they're not already in perimenopause. And, for me, that's a generational thing. So my daughter's 30 years old, and I have to say to her, by the time you get to my age, we won't be needed. This will all be done.
Mhm.
And I'm very much of a mind of, if we do this right now, it won't have to be done again.
Right.
Right.
We say that all the time. It motivates us when we get up. Kim and I both have daughters. Emily has daughters, or I have a daughter. We want the world to be a better place for our daughters and their daughters and generations to come. And I think it will be. I mean, with what you're doing over in the UK, with what we're doing and many, many others that are coming together to talk about menopause and really pull back that curtain and continue to have those conversations. I truly believe in my heart that tomorrow is a new day and tomorrow will be a better day, right? Because of it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I've always joked that it would be solved by the time I got here. So it wasn't. So I had to then do something about it.
And
That's right.
well done to you for what you're doing as well, because you're taking that step out. You're going to be making a huge amount of difference, and I look forward to everybody joining in with you.
We
Yeah.
do too.
Thank you, Deborah.
Is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with as a takeaway of this podcast that we haven't talked about?
Oh, I would say that we've all got a role to play on this. So if you know about menopause, great, talk to somebody else about it. And if you don't, read up. Trusted expert resources are always the best. And, think about yourself during this time, because, this can be a life phase, but life's for living. And let's not let menopause get in the way. And if we all read up about it, if we all get to know ourselves, understand what's going on, and take steps to manage any symptoms, but I guess more take time for ourselves, but don't forget to say menopause. I always recommend 3 times a day until you're used to how the word feels in your mouth.
I
Yeah.
love
There's
that.
words we're using now that a year or two ago I didn't use all the time. And I was teasing April the other day, like, you said vagina on a podcast.
Yeah, I actually, side note on that, got a couple of comments from friends that said, wow, you're really, really stretching yourself, aren't you? Like, no, if you know anything about me, I've been talking about periods and vaginas for many, many years. I've just never said it on a podcast before. So,
No big deal.
yeah, yeah. Well, Deborah, we end all of our podcasts with a rapid fire. So we're going to rapid fire and have a little bit of fun, get to know you a little bit better. So, would you prefer texting or calling?
Calling.
Do you prefer the sunrise or the sunset?
Sunrise.
Hmm. How about music or podcasts?
Music. Always music.
Okay. I have to ask another question though. What kind of music is your favorite music?
I have quite an eclectic mix, actually. So what I'm listening to while I'm out walking is very different. I was listening to jazz yesterday. I think you can always listen to jazz,
Right. Yeah.
but sometimes I might revisit the 90s, or when I'm in the gym, or something that's going to make me feel more like dancing and pumping.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And our favorite and final question for all guests is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, I've not been asked that question before. But my one that I often quote back at my mum is, when you don't want to do something, and my mum once said to me, just just get on with it.
Hmm.
Just grit down and get on with it. And sometimes I hear that play in my mind when I'm thinking, yeah, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. And sometimes things feel hard. And I just think, just grind down and get on with it.
Hmm.
And
Love it.
it's probably not the most inspirational. I think my most inspirational quote that I always quote is, I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Hmm.
And I think the thing that is very relevant for our journey is when she said, real change, enduring change happens one step at a time.
Love
And
Mhm.
it.
to me, I think that is probably the thing that always keeps me going. Because some days you have some good steps, and then other days it feels like you've made a misstep, or
Right.
have you gone backwards. The path of this is not linear, is it? But that always reminds me to keep going and take that next step, because if I think about thank you for asking me about to go right back to the beginning, because you forget that, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You forget to celebrate the ahas, or
Mhm.
to look back and go, do you know what? We've come a long way. We're
Yeah.
not done yet. We've still a lot to do, but we've come a long way. And that quote is my favorite of all time.
Yeah.
I love it.
And that
We
certainly put that next foot forward, right? When you're able to look back and go, okay, okay. Yeah.
we ring a bell when we have a win. So that we all have little bells by our desks. I on behalf of the MiDOViA, you have led the way for us, you have supported us, you've guided us, and we cannot be more thankful and grateful for our partnership. So
Yeah.
thank you for your generosity and your kindness and your total we feel like big hugs all the time when we get to spend time with you. So thank you for that.
It's such a pleasure getting to know you, and I look forward to what we all do next.
Yeah, us
Thank you
too.
Thank
so
you.
much, Deborah. Thanks so much. And that's a wrap. So until next time, go find joy in the journey.
Bye everyone.
Okay. Bye.